It looks like we're getting there.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Today is Wednesday, June 14th, 2023, and this is Lincoln County Board of Commissioners meeting. I will go ahead and call that to order. We do have all three commissioners here, so we do have hearing. I'm going to remind all our audience members to please silence cell phones you might have. We don't have any adoption of the consent calendar today, so we're going to move right into our public hearing regarding the Aloha Valley Golf Course zone change. This is a public hearing on case file 02ZCPC 22 to consider a request by Michael Wilson for a zone change of the Aloha Golf Course from PF Public Facilities to RR5, which is rural residential, on 2 tax lots totaling 55.11 acres. And I hereby open this hearing. The comprehensive plan designation for the subject property is dispersed residential. The applicant is requesting the zoning be changed from public facilities, PF, to rural residential, RR5. The following criteria from Chapter 1 of Lincoln County Code are applicable to the request. Section 1.1235 quasi-judicial amendments. Section 1.0190(3) plan designations dispersed residential. Section 1.1355 rural residential zone RR5. Section 1.1377 public facilities zone PF. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards those criteria just described, or other criteria in the plan or land use regulation which the person believes to apply to this decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes an appeal to LUBA based on that issue. So at this time, I ask the Board of Commissioners to disclose any ex parte communications they may have had, or any basis or conflicts of interest they may have regarding this particular application. Commissioner Hall?
None.
None.
None for me.
And none for me as well. Next up, we're going to ask for the staff report.
Morning, John.
Commissioners, good morning.
Thank you, Ken.
Excellent. Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
As you noted, this is an application by Michael Wilson for a zone change of property generally known as the Aloha Golf Course. The property is a
Oh, excuse me, John. Could you just introduce
Introduce
yourself?
yourself for the record. Yeah.
John O'Leary. I'm a senior planner for Lincoln County Planning and Development.
Thank you.
This is a 55-acre parcel north of Toledo, about a mile and a half north. This property has been used as a golf course for quite some time, since the mid-60s. Prior to that, development pattern for this area was some residential with a dairy farm. Although the golf course property actually was a dairy farm, the clubhouse facility that's on the property was the residence for this one. And it dates back to circa 1956. The underlying designation, comprehensive plan designation of the property is dispersed residential. This was established in the 1980s when the county zoned this area along with the rest of the county. The public facility zoning was placed on top of the Aloha Golf Course, generally at the request of the property owner at the time. There's some history in the application confirming that. The zoning is what it is. The golf course certainly does fit within public facilities zoning. The applicant asserts that the golf course as a viable business is not really a thing anymore. The operation of a golf course is, it's not a requirement. We can't compel someone to operate a private golf course. The applicant would like to change the zoning to make use of the property for other purposes, and generally it's assumed it's going to be for residential purposes. In the application, the applicant states that he would like to convert the clubhouse into a single family residence. Cannot be done in PF zoning, can only be done in some residential zoning, generally, usually. And in this case, the applicant would like to change that zone to R5, rural residential 5. surrounding properties are zoned RR5 as is consistent with the comprehensive plan designation for the area. This makes reasonable sense in its request. The staff has reviewed the application, and found that the application is complete. We presented to the board commissioners today for your consideration. My staff report has been made available to the board of commissioners along with the application materials. To date, we have not received any communication regarding this hearing, this application at our department, so I have nothing to report in terms of other public comments on this matter. You may receive further comments today. Obviously, this is the hearing, so people may have comments today. I can answer any questions you have about this application. I did provide a summary and conclusion in the staff report. I can just briefly hit on this and just state the applicant's assertion that there's been a change in character of the property seems reasonable. There's no analysis provided by the applicant, although staff doesn't really feel that the analysis is necessary in this situation. This is one of those situations where you can take a look at the business and say, well, they can't operate a business. And the applicant is the property owner. The applicant asserts that it seems that the business is viable to be operating a golf course. So that's kind of a reasonable assumption. So,
Yeah.
Are there any questions?
Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
if I could, some preliminary questions. So we're talking again about 55 acres, and the immediate plan by the property owner is to convert the clubhouse building back to a residence, but this also opens the door to 10 additional residences to be built at some point, but no firm plans have been brought forward at this time. Yes or no?
Commissioner, yes, that is correct. The
Mhm.
applicant has suggested that they're going to develop up to 10 residential units. In fact, Mr. Wilson wasn't even clear if he was going to go as far as 10 units. This is a reasonable assumption, I think.
Okay.
And the density would support 10 additional units. There are preliminary questions that haven't been asked or answered associated with that. So obviously, the first thing I would point out is there's no application before the commission today or the county to develop residential units or subdivide or petition or do anything like that. At this point, we don't know what that would look like, and kind of have to wait to see what the applicant, the property owner would propose.
Okay, and then if the time comes when they do want to construct some of these units, I assume it's going to be a standard building permit process. Could you talk about that and maybe specifically, because I know there have been some issues raised related to the water supply in the area and making the accommodate septic systems.
Yes, of course, Commissioner, that's very apt. The question of a building permit, that would be later. The
Yes.
primary thing that would have to happen before any building permits would be submitted to the county is they'd have to create some parcels. Right now, the 50, it may or may not be two actual discrete parcels. I don't know, but generally and usually we're going to look at this as one unit of land. They're going to have, they have one dwelling, at the time, the clubhouse facility can be converted back to a dwelling. It has a septic system and has some water supply, so that can be put back into the use of being a single family residence. Mr. Wilson will have to subdivide the land or otherwise divide it up into some developable parcels. That's going to require a land use application, and that land use application is going to raise certain questions, ones we just brought up. First, I guess most obvious one for us is usually septic before water. I don't know why, but just generally get hung up on the septic first. He's going to have to establish that there are at least 10 sites that can accommodate septic systems in the property.
I think every new parcel would need to be a septic.
We think that that's reasonable, but we don't know until he submits an application. We don't have any application in front of us. We just don't know yet. The other application the other element of that application would be to address the water. At this time, I don't know what that solution would look like. but there are options, could be wells, could be a public water system. Not really sure what, the property owner or future applicant would propose. But at this point, it's, I guess it's premature, but what I can say is Lincoln County will not be issuing any building permits for any future dwellings in this property until those issues have been addressed. Conceivably, one additional building permit may be approved for the entire 55 acres for single family residence, I believe. I guess that's one option. Once the zoning's changed, that is certainly an option for the applicant, so that door would open up with the zone change, but it would just be one additional dwelling for 55 acres. So,
Can you clarify one additional dwelling besides the clubhouse?
yes.
Okay, thank you.
And John,
Oh, we're getting indications in the back of the room. People are having trouble hearing.
Okay, thank you.
okay, Anna,
Okay.
Anna Using Planning Director, yeah, there's the reason for that is that the clubhouse is on its own parcel right now, so it doesn't have to be broken out. But the remainder, that's what John was basically saying.
Can you
the rest of the
pause for just a minute?
acreage Couldn't have one, doesn't have.
Are we still having a hard time hearing there in the back? Oh, you're better. Okay, all right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So the remainder of the part of the rest of the acreage we're talking about, without a follow-up partition process, they could apply for one home now. They just need to take out a septic permit like any other parcel, once it's zoned for residential.
Okay.
And I think one of the most important things that I've got from the whole experience is that when we did take this before the planning commission, we had an opportunity to hear from a lot of the neighbors. And I've spoke with many people about this leading up to previous meetings and taking input. And there was an important moment where during the planning commission level that Andrew Bobbitt, as chair, really helped people that live in the area. They wanted to know more about the project and were concerned about what about this and what about this and what about this. And Commissioner Hall, I think this was more or less coming in the same inquiry you were making, is that this is really not all of those issues are valid, need to be addressed, can be addressed, should be addressed, but it would be in that next partition phase, or the applicant has an opportunity, and we'll hear from the applicant's representative in a few minutes here, to do a planned development. And at that point, there would be an awful lot of opportunity for creative dialogue with neighbors and other people in the community. And it would have to go through a public process, just so I think that was an important moment during where sense of recognition that there's another big bite at this app to address a lot of the important stuff that people have brought up. And I just want to make sure that didn't get lost at all in the back and forth at this stage. Thank you.
Miller?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. John or Anno, Ken and I were going over the packet and looking at our GIS program at this PF zone. Are there any attributes in your minds that you would just point out about the PF zone? And maybe its intent? What are some thoughts?
Of course, Commissioner, public facility zoning, I think I'm gonna just be very practical and pragmatic about this.
Yeah, so I'm looking for.
It's a method of utility zoning is what it is. Higher and better uses of land aren't necessarily popular. So certain types of uses have to be accommodated for when you're zoning. And governmental uses, recreational uses sometimes are not the more marketable use necessarily for a piece of property. So the idea here is that you lay down this PF zoning throughout Lincoln County to isolate areas where you can accommodate the sociological, infrastructure, physical infrastructure you need to develop property and to create urbanization where it needs to be and accomplish those missions. PF zoning secures an area in your county from those more, I would say, marketable uses where you have aggressive residential development, things like that. Gives you places where you're going to be able to get a fire station in the future or a wastewater treatment plant, those types of uses. at the time, this particular property was zoned PF. It kind of made sense.
Yeah.
It was a golf course. It's private. I have to point this out. I don't think we have another piece of property in Lincoln County zoned PF that's in private hands. Typically, and usually you find PF right over the top of property that's owned by a governmental unit. Or something.
I didn't see a lot of PF zoning, period.
You
You know.
know, to the best of my knowledge, I
Yeah.
can't find another piece like that. I didn't look at every single piece, but I
Yeah.
couldn't see anything else that was zoned.
Private. Yeah,
And this one has some unique history that accounts for the PF zoning. I think one of the comments I found, and one of our, Matt Spangler, our previous planning director, confirmed is they didn't really have anything else to put over the top of it at the time.
Hmm,
It made sense. So,
okay.
but yeah.
Is one of the attributes of the zone, a trigger to have public input that wouldn't necessarily occur in other zone changes, or am I wrong on that?
Yeah, Anna Husing, planning director. Everything John said, I completely support, but I gotta be honest with you, when this issue first came up, right? I pulled up the GIS system and I saw public facility zoning. I went, what the heck is that doing there? This is not a public facility. This is not a school.
Hmm,
This is any number of things that would be a public facility. What the heck is it doing zoned PF?
interesting.
And it's this odd litigation history at the dawn of our planning process where basically the commissioners and the applicant wanted that zoning on there. I mean, I believe a legitimate argument could be made. This should have never been public facility zoning. It's not a public, people go, it's a private business, right? The public goes to it for a fee. It's not a public park.
Yeah.
So the change in circumstance is really driving, and I'll let the applicant, of course, make their case, but from my personal perspective, you could almost have said it was zoned in error because it's, and let's say there was an important fire station or something going out there. I mean, if I'm in that mode, if I find a property and I think that really a public facility should go there, then I would petition for a zone, if I'm a public entity, then I would petition for a zone change to provide that kind of zoning. So
Yeah.
it's just kind of a fly in the amber of a strange result that happened decades ago
Okay.
that, and I think it's also important, we did not approach this casually to try to, because we don't do a lot of zone changes, right? That's the legacy of in the unincorporated areas, that zone changes are pretty rare. And they got to be pretty compelling to, people always want to change timber conservation to residential because they want a house.
Yeah.
But there's an awful lot of stuff stopping us. So at the dawn of this process, when this was first being proposed, we did seek technical advice from our former planning director, but also the Department of Land Conservation and Development staff. We wanted all the headlights on to really understand this is an unusual request. This is a rather unusual circumstance. We want to make, of course, we're obligated anytime we change the zone to have a notice to the state anyway, but we didn't wait to do that. We, right up front, first inning of this, it was getting on the phone with our colleagues at the state, sort of saying, here's this odd fact pattern. These are the different directions we think we can go, and advising the applicant. So we did that too.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions, Commissioner Miller?
No, thank you.
Okay,
Appreciate it.
I had a question similar to Commissioner Miller's, but slightly different, and you sort of answered it, but I still want to ask it, which is, you had mentioned, Mr. O'Leary, that you can't make someone run a golf course, but what other uses could you fit into a public facility zone? So in answering Commissioner Miller's question, you had mentioned something like a fire station or wastewater treatment facility, a school or a park. What other types of uses are allowable under the public facilities zone?
Hmm,
Or is that it? Yeah, okay. Okay.
Which kind of implies you could probably use some administrative function or something like that, although I would probably contend that would be ancillary to some of the primary use.
hmm,
So yeah, you could put a school, and if that had some administrative boxes in addition to that, there you go. That's it. I mean, this is meant, Parks and Recreation is part of the PF stuff. It isn't the golf course is specific.
Hmm.
I have to also point out, that's not the only place you can have golf. It's also actually a RR5.
oh,
Hmm,
interesting.
interesting.
Yeah,
So that's one of the.
As a condition of use.
Condition.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's existing, so. carry on after the change. So technically, if the applicant wanted to start a golf course, I mean, the worst case scenario, they have to apply for conditional use permit. I don't think that's a reach.
Well, yeah, are the adjacent homes to the golf course, are they just residential? They're not RR5,
They
right?
are.
They are.
They are. Oh, okay.
And then, yeah, I mean, technically, anybody's are, if I don't apply to the county, just start a golf course. It does exclude driving ranges and mini golf.
Oh, mini golf's excluded? That's cheap. There's a business model. Okay.
But yeah, PF zoning is that primary public utility type use.
Okay,
And I use the word utility. In the economics, it's not just a wastewater treatment plant, but I mean fire station, police station, law enforcement, there's no method. If you had to throw a radio tower up somewhere. Something like that.
Oh, that's often CU.
Oh,
Well, and everything in PF zoning is a CU.
Yeah,
If
and-
it exists, that's fine.
Madam Chair, it looks like
Yes.
Ken has pulled up on our GIS map other examples of PF zones. Is that what you got there?
This is just north of Depot Bay, I'm guessing it's parks there.
Yeah.
State parks.
Yeah.
And then
That's Fogarty, right?
Yeah.
the Wakanda Beach Airport area is also zoned that way and see here in Newport, looks like the Big Creek Park area or yes.
Yeah.
yes.
Hmm.
Otter Rock.
okay, thank you. Appreciate that. All right, any other questions for staff?
Not at this time.
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Okay, thank you.
All right, so we're moving into the testimony portion. I'm just going to kind of walk through how this is going to go. This is a quasi judicial land use hearing, so we do have to do things in a certain order. So first, we're going to take the applicant's testimony, then we'll take testimony in favor of the application, and then we'll take testimony opposing the application. And then the applicant will have time for rebuttal to any opposition. So that's how we're going to do this. So I would ask that we try to keep our testimony to about 5 minutes. And with that, I think we have our applicant's testimony. So if you want to introduce yourself for the record. Yeah.
Chair, Commissioners, my name is Tracy McDowell. I'm the attorney that represents the applicant for this land use application.
Okay.
And my goal today, I have some information, but I want to clarify and share with all of you that I think will touch on many of the questions you just asked staff, and my goal is to build on the testimony that staff just gave and try not to repeat. And so with that, I'll dive in. First, I want to address the differences in the county code between the PF zone and the RR5 zone.
Excuse
So
me?
what I've done is I went through the code in great detail and put together a table that basically shows, you know, what stays the same and what changes if you approve this change. So right now is a PF zone, public parks, playgrounds, swimming pools, golf courses, and other similar recreation facilities intended for use by the public is an outright use in the PF zone. The change to an RR5 zoning would make these uses a conditional use. So this use would still be available through the same or similar type of facility. The landowner would have to apply for a conditional use permit instead of it. Public schools and associated facilities are also an outright use, as well as hospitals in a PF zone. Those uses as well would become conditional uses in an RR5 zone. So those uses aren't lost, they just become conditional uses.
Okay, good point.
Government use, whatever that might be, is an outright use in a PF zone, changes to a conditional use in an RR5 zone. Beachfront protected structures, which is not an issue here, is an outright use in a PF zone. It stays an outright use in an RR5 zone. Public park and playground, golf course, swimming pool, or other similar recreational facility that are not intended for use by the public is a conditional use in a PF zone and is a conditional use in an RR5 zone. This would be available through a community center, daycare center, or other type of similar facility. Public schools and associated facilities are conditional uses in both zoning categories. Hospital, conditional uses. And the difference, I know I'm listing some of these things twice, the difference is that the secondary categories I just talked about, these would be private schools not operated by the government. These would be available in nursing home, retirement facility, or similar uses. So these aren't government uses of the first category that I talked about. Government use again, conditional use remains the same in both categories. Conversion of one outright use to another outright use is a conditional use in both categories. There's one use that's lost with this change from a PF zone to an RR5 zone, and that's a solid waste disposal site. You cannot have a solid waste disposal site in an RR5 zone. This land has never been used for a solid waste disposal site. I would expect that there would be a lot of opposition to that, and it is not intended by the landowner. So the loss of this use is really non-impactful in this application.
And you have about 1 minute to finish up your testimony. Yeah.
Okay. There are several new outright uses and conditional uses that come with an RR5 zone. And I'm not going to go through all those because of time, but there is not an application for a development before you. The land is and always has been privately owned. Past owners permitted certain activities that the current owners do not have to permit. The golf course is closed. It has not been operable for a significant period of time. The other significant change that has happened in the area since the PF zoning was applied, is there's been significant residential development since the 80s in this area. All of it in RR5 zone. This PF zone is surrounded in total by RR5 zoning. This change brings it synchronizes the comprehensive plan designation with the zoning designation. And it also brings congruity and similarity among the land in the area. So with that, I urge you to approve.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, next we're going to hear testimony from others in favor of the application. So if there's anybody that would like to provide testimony in favor of the application, you can come forward. Nope. Do we have anyone online that would like to provide testimony in favor of the application? Okay, no one online. All right. So next we're moving into testimony opposing the application. Again, we were going to limit comments to 5 minutes today, and it would be appreciated if you could keep your comments in relation to the zoning change. So let's start with online. Oh, you said we don't have anyone online. Never mind. So do we have anyone that would like to present comments in opposition to this zone change? If you do, want to come forward, state your name for the record. Claire, can you time?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, quick, set that timer. So my name is Cynthia George, and I'm a past owner and operator of Bowling Green West Coast Compassion Center on Olalla Lake Road. So it's funny that we're now going to zip around and start changing zoning on that road. It's come to my understanding that that whole watershed from the bottom of Buford Hill out to Pioneer Mountain is now compromised. So if you get on the EPA website, How Is My Waterway, and run any of our addresses, including mine at 244 Pioneer Trail, you will find that we are all now in the red. And there should be no developments going on anywhere in the potentially contaminated wetlands and Midcoast aquifer. Midcoast Watershed just came out with a 6-year study. Toledo just came out with a 2-year study, all within the last year, saying that we've got some serious issues. My well tested over 860 parts per million of aluminum, and this, from what I'm finding out now, was an industrial waste. most likely was dumped into the Olalla wetlands. So this all is connected to the golf course watershed also. From what I understand, that water supply there, the golf course is tested over and over for fecal coliform. We don't know what kind of chemicals have been used on that golf course for the last however many years, 60 years, they've been applying chemicals. And unfortunately, the state of Oregon has no water standards when it comes to drinking water in private wells. So you'll be able to pump that poison right into those homes without ever knowing what you're doing to families. And it's time that we stop doing that. Same way with the 1.5 acres that's on Sturtevant that they want to build. All this stuff has got to stop. Toledo is under 1,000 gallons of raw sewage into the Olalla wetlands. Raw sewage off Sturtevant Road. Where do you guys think? Oh, GP is drawing 11 million gallons of water off of that creek every day. They're not taking it from Olalla Lake. The only time they take from Olalla Lake is when the creek gets too low. And let me tell you, the creek bed is dry right now. If anybody would ever go out and actually look, there's no water. People are gonna run out before. Usually we gotta bring water in by September because the wells have all gone dry. GP has drained us all. Well, now with Juno that was fast tracked through, oh, the beds were all completely dry. So I don't know where you guys plan on getting water for these houses, where you plan on pouring more dump sewage. There's no public facilities anywhere, so that's all gonna go into the watershed and the kids are gonna be drinking it again. Add the air. And we, you guys, I was really hoping that somebody would start looking at this in a bigger picture. And you're not gonna do, and is there any historical old trees on that piece of land that hasn't been logged? I mean, if it hasn't been clear cut in a while, it might actually have some historical value too. The children in the East County, oh my God, they lose out on everything. The people in East County get no services from you guys at all. Okay? You took away the medical facility we put in, you took away the gardening centers we put in, you took away everything we try to do for our communities. Now you take away the golf course, oh, they don't need any activities. Pretty soon you're gonna have a gate up there and it's gonna be GP and the county, and that's it. Nobody's gonna be allowed in that so-called public area. So you guys, I hope will stop and think about, you might be subjecting families to some ungodly pesticides, herbicides. We know GP's leaked into that area. The sewer treatment plants leaked into the area. The city of Toledo is still leaking. They're leaking all over town. And where do you think it's going? But into the wetlands. So think before you jump.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, do we have any other testimony in opposition to the
Oh, in favor.
information? What, we already did in paper.
Wait, okay.
Yeah.
Now we're in opposition.
We're in opposition. Yeah, any other testimony in opposition? Nope, no one joined us online, looks like. All right, so moving on here, I need to ask, does anyone request to have the record held open? Okay, I don't see anyone requesting to hold the record open. With that, I will go ahead and close the,
I would like to request until we get further information on what's happening with the watershed in that area, and the EPA and the DEQ is already looking into this issue. You probably need to leave the record open so we get some true scientific facts on what's going on before you make any change.
so Ms. George, you're requesting to hold the
Yeah.
record open? Okay. All right, so I'm going to ask Assistant County Counsel Holbrook to help me with this. So my understanding is once we have a request to hold the record open, we need to hold it open for a minimum of 7 days, but that is after we ask for rebuttal. I think I messed that up.
Hold it down.
It'll turn yellow.
You can pull the microphone over. That's usually County Administrator Johnson. There you go. Yeah.
That one.
I think I messed it up. My apologies. I think I needed to do rebuttals first, but
Yeah, you should ask for rebuttal at this point. So.
Okay, all right, my apologies.
Okay.
All right, so now we have rebuttals. We'll get back to your request. Sorry about that, Ms. George. So now we'll ask for applicants a rebuttal to any opposition statement or.
For the applicant and, I want to briefly point out, while this has been a public facility zoned piece of property, it's never been a public area. It's always been privately owned. It's always been, now, the landowners may have been open to, the public coming in and walking the trails out where but it was a fee for service private golf course. It's never been used as a so-called public facility in the way that I think public facilities have been thought of. And again, there's no application before you bring the development. This is strictly a zone change. Now that zone change can potentially lead to residential development in the future. If that were to occur, there are very strict processes and guidelines that have to be followed to address many of the concerns that are brought before you with water, sewer, that's an important infrastructure question that whoever the applicant is at that time would have to address. But that is not what's before you today. And that's all.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, now I'm going to ask if anyone requests to have the record open, which you had already said you do. So my understanding,
One more question, of anybody?
What?
Is that a public, because I know there's kind of a group of people that live on that, in that development area. Are they all using the same water supply and septic system already hooked up? They each got their own well. What, you don't know what water supply they're using.
Miss George, I really do have to keep going with the process here. So, Assistant County Counsel Holbrook, we had a request to keep the record open. My understanding is we need to keep it open for a minimum of 7 days.
Well-
How does this work? Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd qualify that in that if the request to keep the record open isn't related to criteria for this application, but might be for a later application.
Yeah.
I don't know that you are required to keep it open. Storage, that information would be very germane, and if they apply for additional houses there and wells, septics and that sort of thing, but it doesn't directly apply to this zone change.
Hey, you're the lawyer.
He is.
okay, so then do we need to make a decision on whether we're keeping the request open, and is your advice, Assistant County Counsel Holbrook, that the request to hold it open does not meet the criteria?
I think that's true.
Okay. All right, so then if the record does not, I'm just kind of going through the process here. If the record does not remain open, then the Board of Commissioners would deliberate on the application and evidence and then make a motion for a decision today. If we don't hold the record open. That's the process. Okay. All right, comments from Commissioner Hall or Commissioner Miller on our request to keep the record open, and if that request we feel meets the criteria to do that.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I wouldn't have objections to keeping the record open. I mean, we've all had the informational packet for a while, but there's been testimony offered today that, personally, I think it would be a good opportunity for some more review and reflection before a final decision.
Okay, Commissioner Miller?
Well, I guess I have a technical question here.
Okay.
So if we keep the record open, then we're moving our public hearing to a further meeting date.
That's correct.
Okay,
Yeah, it would be after a time for, you'd set a date for a deadline, if you will, for the any new record information to come in, and another date for the applicant to submit rebuttal, and then you're done. And then you have a hear, you finish up the hearing based upon that new evidence.
Okay, yeah, I concur. I do feel that it's getting the specific request as she sort of framed it is maybe not pertinent, but I think there might be some. I'd like to give us a little bit of time.
Okay.
Yep.
So it sounds like we kind of have and I could go other way, but hearing from both of my commissioners, I'm fine with keeping the record open. Question for Assistant County Counsel Holbrook. My understanding is if the record remains open, the three of us still cannot have ex parte contact, meaning information can come in, but we cannot discuss this with anybody. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I just
Yeah.
want to make that clear to everybody in the audience that we're not able to respond or discuss, but information could still
Yeah.
come in.
And Madam Chair, a question for Council Holbrook. The lane of that public record, is it still completely wide open or is it narrowed somewhat?
It should be framed within the request for it to be left open.
Okay.
Here, that it seems though the request is related to water quality and
Should address the ordinances. That's the key thing.
it should address the.
Okay.
ordinances.
Okay, and I do think I'll do my due diligence to stay in that, line of contemplation when I'm thinking about it. So thank you for that clarification. Okay,
Okay, so it looks like we're gonna keep the record open, and then with that, we need to set a date for submitting any additional evidence and a later date for any response to new evidence, as well as setting a further hearing date to consider the evidence, deliberate, and vote, is my understanding. So let's see, Ken, could you just click kind of the calendar kind of by the time? I'm kind of a visual person, so thank you. Seeing dates is really helpful. So today is the 14th. So if we kept the record open 7 days, that would be the 21st, which is already when we have our Board of Commissioners meeting, and I think a pretty full agenda, at least the last time I saw it. So
And
maybe we
we have a meeting on the 28th, don't we? Because of it being the fifth Wednesday. Oh,
yeah,
it's budget only. So
okay. So maybe we need to look at, Assistant County Counsel
You
Holbrook.
can allow for two deadlines and then your hearing.
two deadlines.
Right.
Which are-
You've got a deadline for the opponent to submit evidence.
Okay.
or Anybody that's.
Okay.
submitting new
I don't
evidence,
use
then
it. We always call it like 7 and 7, right?
Okay.
And the first, right, but Oregonians, when they participate in established standing by being here or letter writing, statutory right to ask for a 7-day leave the record open.
Okay.
So we do, so that's the first 7.
Okay,
We've done the calendaring on that.
yeah,
The second 7 would be only, I believe, only the applicant then has the second 7-day window to provide rebuttal testimony to whatever comes into the record
I agree.
in the
with you.
week
Okay.
long, the first 7. So 7 and 7, and then I think you're safe allowing both of those 7 and 7s to run their course.
okay,
Okay.
so
Schedule.
Wondering about
Director.
July.
So our first 7 days to keep the record open. Today is the 12th. No, sorry. We're May. Okay. Thank you, Ken. So the first 7 days would be holding the record open till the 21st. Right, and then for the rebuttal from the applicant, that would be the 28th. Am I doing this correctly?
You are.
Okay,
Then hearing would continue, could be to your next regular date or one later.
we have to schedule that hearing right now, or can we come back and schedule that?
It would be best for everyone if you set it now.
Okay, so I think our regular business meeting is July 2nd.
yes.
No, fifth. The second is,
July, sorry. Okay, I was looking at the bottom, man. Okay, so I think our this meeting is the 5th, so I would say that we set our hearing on the 5th.
Okay.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna repeat myself here. So our 7 days of holding the record open will go from now until June 21st, would be until June 28th, and then our hearing would be July 5th.
And one more clarifying question for our attorney, if I could. So that hearing will be conducted on the record that we, at that point, will only be able to consider what's been presented up to today, and today, whatever written comments or testimony comes.
No new test.
Right.
Right,
There'll be
right.
no new
Right.
testimony and there'll be no new evidence after the
Right.
28th. And so that's all you consider. There won't be any further testimony or any further evidence on July 5th.
Okay,
It'll just be
Deliberate
deliberating.
and voting. Okay,
that's what I thought.
All right.
Wanted to verify.
great. Okay, so the record is not closed. It is remaining open, so I don't need to gavel that out. And if there's anything else from commissioners,
Not on
staff?
the subject.
okay, no? All right, well, then with that, we will go ahead and are we adjourning or just continuing?
Or on-
We're continuing. No, we have nothing else in our agenda. So we're adjourning this meeting and we'll reconvene this hearing on the 5th of July.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.